Good morning, everyone. This is Monday morning, and I have to confess the little thing is spinning on my computer when I hit go live, and it takes a few seconds before it pops up, so I never know if I'm live or not in these first few seconds. But at any rate, I wish you a good Monday morning. This is going to be a big week for all of us, so I hope that you are deep in prayer and trust in God in all things. And yesterday in church, I talked about trust. And to talk about trust, I used a passage, a story from the Hebrew scriptures when the Assyrians were threatening Jerusalem. And you can see that online if you like. Today, I want to do a different kind of thing. I want to look at Jesus and his ministry. And I want to start at Jesus' baptism. When Jesus was baptized, and we can read this in the different gospels, there was a dove and the sky parted, and some heard the sound of thunder, and others heard God speak the words, "This is my son, my beloved. In him I am well pleased." And immediately, before he was even dry from the baptismal waters, he went to the wilderness and spent 40 days in prayer alone with God. And he learned a lot in those 40 days. He learned who he was not, the shape of his ministry, the depth of his calling, and his connection with God. He knew he could trust in the one who sent him. At the end of those 40 days, he knew the difference between the voice of God and the voice of temptation. So that's probably good advice for us too. In most of Jesus' stories, we read about where over and over and over again the words, Jesus withdrew and he found a quiet place. Jesus took time away to pray. Always, daily, always, after every teaching, after every healing, after every encounter, Jesus took time away to pray. And if we move forward in Scripture to the story of the Transfiguration, and again, these are in multiple Gospels, then we also hear God speaking again through the clouds. And this time, God's voice says, "This is my son, my beloved, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." So Jesus is, in God's estimation, someone we can listen to. Not a bad reference, right? Having God fill out your recommendation, that's pretty high praise. So, what is it about Jesus that formed this trust with God? I think obviously, right off the top, we can say over and over and over again, Jesus took time away to pray. And he trusted God. God trusted Jesus. And trust doesn't happen immediately, does it? No, we know that trust takes time to build. And in any relationship we have, trust comes after time together, after knowing one another, after understanding one's character, one's motivations. And it's the same with God. If we want to have a life built upon the trust of God, we have to take the time to get to know God in a relationship. And I have some strategies for you to do that today. And this week, as we go to the polls, I have looked at Psalm 121 over and over again, because in my mind, it doesn't matter who sits in Washington. Ultimately, eternally, my hope is in God. Yes, of course, it matters to me who wins the election, and I will cast a vote. But my hope and my faith and my life are built upon the promises of God. That's where I ground myself. And one of the activities I have found helpful recently is looking at Psalm 121 And it says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord. And I like to rewrite that in my journal as need be for the times. For instance, when I look to the polls, when I look to the election results, when I look to the new news coverage, from where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord. When I look upon riots and anger and people fighting one another, from where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord. When I look at decisions I have to make and difficulties I have and pain and suffering around me, from where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord. I invite you to try this, whether you write it in a journal or pray it in your depths. Lift up your eyes to whatever troubles you have around you and remind yourself your help comes from God, and lean into that. Speaking of leaning into that, Proverbs 3 verses 5 and 6 are amazing verses. Love these. Trust in God with all of your heart and lean not in your own understanding. Folks, we have a skewed and limited view of our life and our world. God has a bigger and broader perspective. If God is guiding you, leading you, trust God. Trust where God is leading you. Trust in God and lean not on your own understanding. Your own understanding may be corrupted and you wouldn't even know it. It happens, even to the best of us. Sometimes we hear the voice of temptation and we understand it as a voice of reason, of practicality, of common sense. So trust in God. Listen to God and how God is guiding you. And a way to develop the ears for that is to get to know God. Spend time with God. Build that relationship. Know God's character. Let God know you and how you interact with one another. For instance, can you pray honestly as you are? I always thought growing up that prayers had to be given in a pretty formal and eloquent manner, but I have found with each passing moment in my life, the more honest I am, brutally honest with God, laying it out like I would my closest friend or confidant, that is when I have the best conversations with God. Sometimes it's a temper tantrum, I admit. Sometimes it's accusatory. God, why are you allowing this? Why are you letting this happen? God, how can you stand there? These are honest prayers, and this is how we get to know each other and hear each other. When I've opened myself to God in those situations, I see that and I hear that God is around me all the time. But I have to work on my faith eyesight and my faith hearing so that I can see and hear the many ways that God is around. A practical way to do this is to pray every day, and I want to help you do that. There are apps for that, and yes, they are helpful. I use an app called Insight Timer, and it's just the icon is a white square and it has a brown bowl in the middle of it. And there are so many different options inside this app. I like to keep it simple. You can do timed meditations where you just have silence for whatever amount of time you choose. You can have guided meditations. There's a lot of variety within this app, but it helps you daily to just sit down, be still, and listen. So here's what I invite you to work on this week. 1, find a practice of prayer. Is there an app that will help you? Insight Timer or a Bible app, YouVersion or Bible Gateway? Those are great apps as well. Or how is it that you need? What structure do you need? What underpinning things help you to be attentive to that practice? Find that this week. Make a commitment, and it depends on not on how you feel, but on what you decide. So it's commitment over emotion. I don't feel like praying right now, but I'm committed to this. I'm committed to my relationship with God. So I commit to spending time with prayer, in prayer with God every day. Do that. That's first and foremost. Second, I invite you to play around with Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from God. I lift up my eyes to the COVID situation around us. From where will my help come? My help comes from God. Whatever is troubling you, whatever is mounting up against you, pray it. Draw near to God. And as you do this, as you develop this practice over time, you will begin to understand how close God is, how near God is. And once you have that relationship, then you can lean into the trust. But that's how you build trust with God. Just like in any other relationship, you spend time together. You get to know one another. You gradually let each other see, you allow the other to see you in the worst of times and in the better of times. Let God have it all. Let God have what you feel, what you want, whatever is in your mind and heart at the moment. God is big enough and can handle that. So friends, build trust in God this week. Use Psalm 121. Establish a practice to pray. Even if it starts out as 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, make it a discipline. Make it a daily habit to quiet yourself and to sit and listen. Thanks for joining me today, friends, and I hope you have found this helpful. I'm Melissa Ebken. I'm the pastor at the Niantic Christian Church in the Illiopolis Christian Church, and there is more content on these pages and on our YouTube channel. If you have found this video helpful, I hope you'll share it with your friends so they can be blessed as well. Bye for now, and I will see you again soon.